In the heart of Africa, under the red sun that kissed the horizon, the elders often said, "Do not laugh at the small hut today, for tomorrow it may rise higher than the palace." This is the story of Adewale, a young mechanic whose hands were stained with engine oil, but whose heart carried dreams larger than the skies. His days were long, filled with grease, sweat, and hope for a brighter tomorrow. In the bustling town of Nsibidi, Adewale lived a humble life, fixing broken bicycles, repairing rusty cars, and finding joy in helping villagers keep their wheels turning. He was poor in wealth but rich in determination, a man whose strength lay not in what he owned, but in what he dreamed. Yet deep inside his chest beat a heart that longed for more than survival. It longed for love, belonging, and a future shared. And in that same village lived Nia, a graceful young woman admired by all for her beauty and elegance. When she walked through the busy market in her colorful attire, heads turned and whispers followed. Adewale loved her deeply. He dreamed of building a life with her, not of riches or gold, but of love, laughter, and simple joys. Yet, dreams often meet the harsh winds of reality, and fate tested him in ways he never expected. With trembling courage, Adewale finally approached Nia to ask for her hand. His voice carried both hope and fear, his eyes filled with sincerity. But her heart had already turned elsewhere. Nia chose a wealthy merchant, Obinna, draped in gold and silk, a man who promised her luxuries that Adewale could not. In that moment, every dream Adewale had carefully carried inside him shattered into silence, as the villagers looked on in pity and whispers filled the air. Her rejection cut deeper than any wound. To Adewale, it was not just the loss of love, but the cruel reminder of his poverty. Humiliated before the very people he had grown up among, he carried his shame like a heavy stone upon his back. He knew he could not stay. With sorrow burning in his chest and tears hidden behind his strong face, Adewale turned away from Nia, and from Nsibidi, determined never to return until he had become someone greater. The road away from Nsibidi was long, dusty, and uncertain. With only a small bag over his shoulder, Adewale left behind his childhood, his dreams, and his love. Yet though he walked away with nothing, something powerful was born inside him that night. A vow. He swore that he would rise, that he would return not as the poor mechanic mocked by whispers, but as a man whose very name would command respect, wealth, and honor across nations. Years passed, and whispers began to spread. A poor mechanic had risen to heights unimaginable. A man who once lived in dust and sweat now sat among kings and rulers. Adewale had become a billionaire. When destiny brought him back to Nsibidi, the same village that once looked down on him, hearts trembled and tongues wagged. For this was not just the return of a man. It was the return of a legend, forged from pain, courage, and destiny. Adewale's journey carried him far from Nsibidi, to a bustling coastal city where ships from distant lands docked with treasures and stories. The air smelled of salt, sweat, and spice. Here, men rose from nothing to greatness, and others fell from wealth into ruin. Adewale had no riches, no family name, no guiding hand. Yet he had determination carved into his soul. The city would test him, break him, and shape him into something greater. The first nights were harsh. With no home, Adewale slept under a broken shed, clutching the same small bag he had carried from Nsibidi. The cold wind pierced his skin, hunger gnawed at his stomach, and loneliness echoed louder than the city's chaos. Many would have returned home in shame, but Adewale's pride was stronger than his suffering. He whispered to himself, "I will not die here. I will rise, or I will not return at all." Opportunity came in the form of a small mechanic shop by the docks. The owner, an old man with weary eyes, noticed Adewale's skill and gave him a chance. Day after day, Adewale worked harder than all the others. His hands grew rougher, his body leaner, but his mind sharper. He studied every machine, memorized every gear, and listened to the rhythms of engines like a drummer learning sacred beats. Slowly, people began to notice his gift. One day, a wealthy trader's truck broke down on the busy road, blocking the way. Mechanics struggled, but none could fix it. Adewale stepped forward, calm and steady. Within moments, with tools fashioned from scraps, he brought the engine back to life. The crowd gasped in awe, and the trader, impressed by his genius, rewarded him with silver coins. It was the first spark. The world was beginning to see that Adewale was no ordinary man. That night, under the stars, Adewale stared at the silver coins in his hands. They were small, almost nothing compared to the riches he imagined. Yet they meant everything. For the first time, he saw the path opening before him. He did not just want coins. He wanted wealth, power, and a name that would never again be mocked. His heart beat faster with hunger, not of food, but of ambition. The fire inside him had been lit. Instead of spending his coins foolishly, Adewale wandered the markets, listening to traders, learning about goods, routes, and bargains. He observed how wealth moved, not in straight lines, but in circles of risk and opportunity. He saw that true riches were not in hands that worked alone, but in minds that dared to build, invest, and command. From that day, Adewale decided he would not remain just a mechanic. He would become a man of commerce. Despite his struggles, Adewale never forgot kindness. When he earned enough to buy bread, he shared it with hungry children who roamed the streets barefoot. They looked at him with gratitude, calling him brother. Though he longed for wealth, he knew power meant nothing without humanity. The city was shaping him into something greater than just a man chasing fortune. It was shaping him into a leader, a man whose rise would be remembered for generations. At night, while others slept, Adewale sat beneath a dim lantern, scribbling on scraps of paper. He calculated profits, imagined trading routes, and dreamed of ships bearing his name. His mind refused to rest. He knew dreams alone would not change his destiny, only relentless effort would. And so, Adewale worked, studied, and planned, until his vision grew clearer. He would rise not by chance, but by design. His destiny was being drawn, line by line. To survive, Adewale took shifts at the docks, lifting heavy cargo under the blazing sun. His muscles ached, yet he welcomed the pain. Each coin earned went into savings, never wasted. While others laughed, drank, and spent their wages, Adewale remained focused. He knew discipline was the secret that separated dreamers from leaders. Every sack of grain he carried was another step toward his future empire. From the docks, he studied ships as they came and went, carrying salt, gold, and cloth. Traders argued loudly, fortunes changed hands. Adewale realized that the world was bigger than Nsibiti, bigger than this city. He wanted to command fleets, to see his name carried across oceans. Watching sails vanish into the horizon, he whispered, "One day, the waves will carry my wealth too. I will not remain a worker. I will own these ships." One evening, an old merchant noticed his eagerness and shared wisdom. "Wealth," the elder said, "is not in gold but in knowledge and timing." Adewale listened with respect, absorbing every word. The merchant taught him about trade winds, bargains, and risk. Though still poor, he had gained a treasure greater than silver, understanding. Adewale knew this wisdom was the seed that would one day grow into his empire. Others mocked him for living simply, but Adewale never bent. He saved every coin in a small wooden box hidden beneath his bed. While friends wasted fortunes on drink and pleasure, he built discipline brick by brick. Nights of hunger, days of sweat, all fed into his savings. The box grew heavier with time, a symbol of his unshakable focus. He told himself, "Sacrifice today is the price of greatness tomorrow." After years of sacrifice, Adewale finally bought a small boat. The villagers laughed, calling it worthless, but he saw it as the beginning of his empire. With that boat, he ferried goods across the coast, earning slowly but steadily. Every trip taught him more about trade, storms, and profit. To Adewale, it was not just a vessel. It was proof that dreams take root in the smallest beginnings. The sea tested him with storms, rain, and sleepless nights. More than once, his boat nearly sank, but Adewale refused to surrender. Every storm he survived hardened him, taught him courage, and gave him mastery of the waves. Traders began to trust him, knowing he delivered goods safely. What started as whispers grew into respect, and his reputation spread across the coastline like fire carried by the wind. Success drew attention. One wealthy trader, impressed by his honesty and skill, offered partnership. Adewale shook his hand, sealing a deal that would change everything. No longer a poor mechanic, no longer a dock worker. He was now stepping into the circle of men who controlled wealth. His rise had begun, yet in his heart, he still remembered the rejection, the laughter, and the vow he swore beneath the setting sun. Adewale spread maps on his wooden table, marking routes with charcoal. He dreamed of ships bearing his name, carrying goods far beyond the coast. Each line on the map was a vision of future riches. His trade grew steadily, profits rising with every deal. He was no longer a boy struggling in the city. He was becoming a man with a growing network, feared storms but feared failure even more. With profits from his first deals, Adewale bought more boats. His workers cheered as he expanded, providing jobs for the poor. For many, he became a symbol of hope, proof that discipline and persistence could change destiny. Rivals laughed at his small beginnings, but Adewale kept moving, one vessel at a time. He knew true power wasn't built overnight, but through patience and relentless determination. In crowded markets, Adewale bargained with fierce confidence. Traders saw his sharp mind and fair hand. He never cheated, yet he never lost. His deals carried wisdom far beyond his years. Soon, whispers spread that Adewale's word was as strong as gold. With every handshake, his reputation grew, until even wealthy men sought him. What began as one boat was quickly becoming a trading force feared across the coast. As Adewale's star rose, so did jealousy. Rival traders glared, their pride wounded by his rapid climb. They mocked him as the mechanic boy, but inside they trembled. Each week his ships brought back more wealth, each deal silenced their laughter. Yet their envy sharpened into knives, and secret plots began forming. Adewale knew enemies were watching, but he welcomed it. Success always drew envy like flies to honey. Instead of drowning in greed, Adewale lifted others with him. He hired men from the streets, gave them fair wages and demanded discipline. Under his leadership, they worked as one, carrying his vision like fire. His workers saw not just a master, but a man who believed in their future. Loyalty bound them together, and Adewale's enterprise grew. He was no longer alone. An army of faith carried him. With growing wealth, Adewale ventured into gold. The sight of shining bars filled him with pride, yet also reminded him of hunger days beneath broken sheds. Each coin was a reminder of his vow, never to bow again to poverty or humiliation. His fortune grew, but he remained careful. Gold could blind men, but for Adewale, it was a tool, not an idol. His eyes stayed fixed on empire. At sunrise his fleet set sail, waves crashing beneath their wooden hulls. Villagers gathered to watch, whispering that the poor mechanic had become a sea lord. The horizon glowed, reflecting his rising power. For Adewale, this was only the beginning. Each ship carried not just goods, but a piece of his dream. From the docks to the far horizon, his name began echoing across seas like a promise. He wrote letters by lantern light, sealing them with wax. Across regions, he formed alliances with chiefs, rulers, and merchants. His influence extended beyond trade, reaching politics. His name opened doors once locked to men of his birth. Yet with power came danger. He knew alliances could crumble, but he relied on wisdom and caution. Adewale had risen, but he was far from finished. His empire had only begun. When Adewale returned home with riches, villagers gathered to praise him. Children ran, laughing as they touched the man once mocked for poverty. Women blessed him, men saluted him. He shared food and gifts, remembering those who once pitied him. To his people, he was no longer the boy who left Nsibidi. He was their pride, their story of hope. A man who rose from dust to shine like gold. But in the shadows, rivals whispered. Their envy burned hotter as Adewale's wealth spread. They saw his ships, his power, his fame, and felt their own fortunes threatened. Greed and pride drove them to plan betrayal. He was once a mechanic, they spat. He does not deserve this throne. Plots thickened like storm clouds. Though Adewale was celebrated in the light, darkness was gathering around his empire's rise. Messengers warned him of betrayal, but Adewale did not flinch. He had faced storms fiercer than men. Let them come, he said, his eyes sharp as iron. Instead of fear, he prepared. His enemies thought wealth made him soft, but hunger had once been his teacher. He knew how to survive, how to rise. Betrayal did not scare him. It reminded him that his journey was far from over. Warehouses filled with cloth, salt, spices, and gold. Adewale's empire now touched many shores. His influence felt everywhere. From the smallest trader to wealthy rulers, all knew his name. Yet he walked humbly, never forgetting the boy who once slept under a shed. His riches were proof of his vow, but his humility kept him respected. The empire was not just wealth, it was his story made flesh. He gathered young traders, teaching them what he had learned. Wealth without wisdom will vanish, he said. His words carried weight, for they came from experience, not pride. He gave knowledge freely, shaping a new generation. Some would rise under his guidance, others would betray, but Adewale believed in planting seeds. His legacy would not only be gold, but wisdom shared among those willing to learn. From a high cliff, Adewale looked down at his ships and warehouses. The land once foreign was now his kingdom. He smiled faintly, remembering rejection and hunger. All those wounds had become fuel. Yet deep inside, he still carried the sting of humiliation. He had wealth, power, respect, but he waited for the day when destiny would place him before the one who once cast him aside. Back in Nsibidi, word spread of Adewale's fortune. Elders spoke in awe, youths whispered his name with pride. Those who once mocked him bowed their heads in shame. Women who ignored him sighed with regret. Among them was Abiola, who had chosen wealth over love. She listened in silence, her heart heavy. The mechanic boy she had rejected had become greater than all the men she once admired. Abiola lived in luxury, married to the rich man she once admired. Yet her heart was restless. Her husband's wealth came with arrogance and cruelty. She watched servants suffer, her laughter long gone. Memories of Adewale returned, not as the poor mechanic, but as the man who had loved her sincerely. Each whisper of his rising empire pierced her with regret she could no longer silence. At night, Abiola stood by her window, staring at the horizon. News of Adewale's ships filled her ears, her heart aching with what she had lost. She thought of his gentle eyes, his dreams, his vow. Yet she had chosen another path, and now it was too late. The horizon carried his name like a song, while she remained caged in regret. The choice she once made had chained her forever. Meanwhile, Adewale walked through the city streets, people bowing before him. The poor mechanic was gone, replaced by a leader, a legend. Yet in his heart he carried no arrogance. He remembered every hunger, every tear, every rejection. His rise was not for revenge alone, but to prove destiny could not be chained by poverty. Each step echoed power, but also humility, the mark of a true king. The day came when Adewale's fleet returned to Nsibidi. Ships lined the shore, sails towering like wings of destiny. Villagers rushed to witness the boy they once mocked, now arriving as a king. Drums beat, voices chanted, children shouted his name. Elders bowed in awe. Adewale stepped onto the soil of his past, his presence shining brighter than gold. The land trembled, for destiny had returned home. The same elders who once dismissed him now bowed deeply. Their voices shook as they welcomed him with honor. Son of Nsibidi, you have returned greater than kings, they said. Adewale's eyes softened, but his heart remembered the scorn. He smiled humbly, accepting their respect. The circle of fate had closed, from rejection to reverence. He had not only risen, he had turned shame into glory. In silence, Abiola watched from the shadows. Her heart thundered as she saw the man she once rejected, now walking like a lion among men. Regret weighed heavy upon her soul, pressing harder with every cheer he received. Her jewels, her silks, her mansion, none of it matched the light that radiated from Adewale. She realized too late that true wealth was never measured in gold. Their eyes met at last. Abiola's lips trembled, words trapped in sorrow. Adewale stood calm, his gaze steady. Memories of love and pain swirled between them like smoke. She wanted to speak, to undo the past, but fate offered no mercy. Adewale did not gloat, nor did he bow. He simply looked, and in that look, Abiola felt the full weight of her choice. Heavy, eternal, and irreversible. Tears streamed down Abiola's face, glittering like broken glass. She wanted to whisper apologies, to beg for forgiveness, but her pride and fate chained her tongue. Adewale turned slightly, his silence sharper than 1,000 words. She saw in his eyes not anger, but distance, a man who had outgrown her memory. Her tears fell harder, for she realized she was nothing more than a shadow of his past. Lifting his hand, Adewale addressed the people. His voice carried strength, his words filled with wisdom. Poverty is not the end of destiny. Rejection is not the end of hope. I stand before you not as a prince by birth, but as a man who refused to bow. The crowd roared, their hearts ignited. His rise was no longer just his own. It became a story for every soul. The villagers shouted his name, lifting their hands in praise. Children danced, drummers beat rhythms of victory, Women ululated with joy. The boy who once begged for food was now the pride of Nsibidi. Each cheer echoed across the hills, carried by the wind. Adewale's heart swelled, not with pride alone but with gratitude. He had transformed pain into power, and despair into an anthem of hope. Rivals who once plotted against him fell to their knees. Their schemes had crumbled under his strength, their envy drowned by his rise. They bowed, trembling, acknowledging his dominion. Adewale did not humiliate them. Instead, he extended mercy. "Let envy die," he said. "Build, do not destroy." His mercy cut deeper than revenge. In that moment, even enemies respected the man who chose wisdom over wrath. Instead of feasting in mansions, Adewale walked among the poor. He shared food, gold, and clothing, lifting those who once walked as he did. The hungry wept, the weak rejoiced, and the forgotten felt seen again. His wealth became a river flowing into many hands. For Adewale, riches were not for vanity but for healing. In lifting others, he built something greater than empire. He built legacy. From a corner, Abiola watched him share with the needy. Her heart broke further. The man she once rejected had become not only wealthy, but a leader of compassion. She saw clearly now. She had chosen gold without soul, while Adewale carried both. Tears blurred her vision as her regret deepened into despair. She was chained by a past decision that no wealth or power could ever undo. That night, Adewale knelt under the moon, whispering prayers. He sought guidance, not wealth. "Let me not lose my soul to riches," he prayed. The moonlight bathed him, a symbol of purity amidst power. His humility anchored his greatness. Even with empires under his command, Adewale bowed before the unseen, proving that true strength came not from gold or ships, but from surrendering to wisdom and faith. At dawn, Adewale stood tall, his figure outlined by the rising sun. Behind him lay ships, riches, and nations bound to his name. Before him lay people whose lives he had touched. His journey from hunger to glory had reached its peak. He was no longer just a trader. He was a living testament of destiny fulfilled. The mechanic boy had become a legend carved into the heart of time. Adewale returned to Nsibidi, greeted by cheers and open arms. Children ran, elders bowed, and the once skeptical villagers celebrated his rise. The boy they once mocked was now a symbol of hope and perseverance. His journey reminded all that destiny favors those who endure, dream, and act with courage, no matter how humble their beginnings. Abiola stood silently, facing Adewale. Her heart ached with the weight of regret. She realized her choice for wealth over love had cost her deeply. Adewale's eyes held neither anger nor pride, only calm dignity. She understood too late that true greatness comes from integrity, vision, and resilience, lessons she had ignored in youth. Adewale gathered the youth, sharing his story of hardship, rejection, and triumph. He taught that persistence, discipline, and patience create true success. Material wealth alone was fleeting. Character, courage, and vision built lasting legacies. His words inspired many to chase dreams fearlessly and honorably, knowing that effort and resilience could rewrite destiny. With his resources, Adewale helped rebuild the village. New homes, schools, and markets rose where once there was only struggle. Every brick symbolized hope, every roof a promise fulfilled. The community prospered alongside him. His wealth became a tool for transformation, proving that generosity and leadership matter more than riches for personal pride. Adewale distributed food and goods to those in need. Children laughed as they received bread and toys. Mothers thanked him with tears in their eyes. Every act of kindness multiplied his influence and solidified his legacy. He taught that true power lies not in hoarding wealth, but in lifting others along the path to success. He welcomed traders and leaders from distant lands, forming alliances based on respect and trust. His empire grew not through exploitation, but collaboration. Wisdom, fairness, and vision became the pillars of his rule. Adewale proved that leadership built on integrity surpasses simple wealth, and that respect from others is earned through deeds, not inherited status. As the sun set over his fleet, Adewale reflected on the journey from a small shed to empire. Every hardship, betrayal, and rejection had been a lesson. Gratitude filled his heart, knowing that perseverance and humility had transformed destiny. His story was now a beacon, showing that every obstacle is a stepping stone toward greatness when met with courage and wisdom. Adewale met Abiola one last time, silently conveying forgiveness and strength. His rise was not revenge, but triumph over fate's tests. She realized humility and patience were greater than wealth, and her regret lingered. Adewale's journey showed that true victory lies in self-mastery, resilience, and compassion, not in seeking vengeance for past slights. The village celebrated a festival in his honor. Music, dance, and feasts filled the streets. Children ran with joy. Elders blessed the man who proved dreams can come true. Adewale smiled, not for glory, but because he had inspired hope. The festival became a tradition, teaching generations that persistence, kindness, and vision can change lives and uplift communities. He trained young mechanics and traders, ensuring his knowledge endured. Hands that once repaired bicycles now guided others toward mastery. Skills, discipline, and ethics were passed on. Adewale's legacy grew beyond wealth, touching hearts and shaping futures. The boy from Nsibidi had created a movement, proving that greatness is shared and multiplied through teaching. At dawn, Adewale stood before the rising sun, a symbol of new beginnings. His journey showed that no setback, rejection, or poverty can limit one's destiny. Vision, effort, and perseverance carve paths where none seem possible. The sun reflected on his face, a promise to all. Greatness is achievable, even from humble roots, when guided by courage and unwavering faith. Nsibidi thrived under his guidance. Markets flourished, children learned, and elders smiled with pride. Adewale had transformed not just his life, but the entire village. His story became legend, teaching generations that resilience, wisdom, and kindness are the true markers of success, far more than fleeting wealth or superficial power. Finally, Adewale walked toward the horizon, his legacy secure. Every step reflected courage, vision, and compassion. His life proved that humble beginnings, combined with determination, could overcome any obstacle. Rejection, poverty, and envy were transformed into tools of triumph. The mechanic boy of Nsibidi had become a legend, timeless, inspiring, and eternal.